And it's way more inspiring when you're like someone that everybody is admiring, and yet you remain that kid you once was, who was madly in love with music and did that for fun and for joy. And, you know, like Paul McCartney, I was trembling so much when I met him in my first rehearsal with David Crosby, and he came into the room and he was like patting my back. I was like, oh, don't worry, we're both bass players, you know. And he was so cool. He made me feel just like equal to him. Yeah. And that's a quality that I admire in people, when you don't put others down in order to shine bigger yourself, but, you know, when people rise by lifting others. That's beautiful.
Brian Smith here, and welcome to the Dream Path Podcast, where I try to get inside the heads of talented creatives from all over the world. My goal is to demystify and humanize the creative process and make it accessible to everyone. Now let's jump in. Mai Leisz is on the show today. Mai is a bass player and composer from the post-Soviet country of Estonia. In 2010, she moved to Sweden, where she honed her craft as an electric bass player and composer, obtaining a master's degree in jazz and bass guitar from the Royal College of Music in Stockholm. This is also where she formed her own jazz fusion group, MaiGroup. Mai's story takes us from an island in Estonia to busking in the subways of Stockholm to almost overnight performing with Jackson Browne, as well as writing and recording with two-time Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee David Crosby. According to Crosby, when he listens to Mai play, he doesn't just hear an accomplished musician, he hears several accomplished musicians, and they're all listening to each other. He goes on to say that Mai is a melodic bass player, which makes her really unique. It's a difficult style and requires an enormous amount of talent and musical knowledge. It's not something you hear every day. Even within the narrow field of melodic bassists, Mai's sound is unique and impressive. MaiGroup has released 3 albums: Love in 2013, You in 2015, and the third album, Metamorphosis, was released in April 2019, featuring world-renowned guests such as David Crosby, Charles Lloyd, and Greg Lease. I had the privilege of seeing Mai perform at the Bass Bash in Anaheim, California recently, as part of the NAMM show. I've also listened to all of her albums, and I can tell you that she's every bit as talented and dynamic on stage as she is on her albums. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this talk with the uber-talented and preeminent bass guitarist, Mai Leisz. Mai Leisz, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for being on the show. What brings you to Anaheim?
Well, it's like an annual meeting place for music merchandisers.
Right.
And music merchants, that's the word.
Or the National Association of Music Merchants.
Merchants,
right?
Yeah.
I had to look that up this morning. I didn't know what it stood for.
Yeah, I did the same thing. And musicians, I guess it's also like, you know, sometimes you don't see anyone for a long time, but you can make sure that you see them at NAMM. It's a place where, you know, merchants, they show up, kind of release new gear, new guitars, new pedals, whatever. Musicians are all into that. But I actually had 2 performances. I played yesterday at 5 o'clock with Marcus Eaton at Sennheiser booth, and had actually my first show under my own name in the United States of America.
And that's the one I saw, I think.
Yeah, the Bass Bash.
9 o'clock Bass Bash, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Glad
you
were there.
Great performance. Yeah, I got some pictures of you. I don't know if you saw me squatting down there, getting pictures with my iPhone. I didn't.
I was just trembling, trying to find my way on the fingerboard.
Oh, really? You're kind of nervous?
Yeah, I mean, Bass Bash, it's like stepping into the lion's den of bass players, you know.
Oh, yeah.
But you know, we're all one family, really, speaking the same language. And I guess eventually I just started focusing on that instead of like, oh my God, everybody's judging me. You know, you just have to let go of those fears and just do what you're born to do, and, you know, play what's in your heart. Nobody can judge that, right?
Well, I've noticed that there is a community of bass players, and it does feel like a family or a community. I just started researching bass because I'm a guitar player. I played guitar for years. Steel string, 6-string guitars, and acoustic. And I just this winter got my first bass.
All right.
And for Christmas, I bought it for myself, or my wife did. And I bought a PRS, like an older PRS bass. I didn't even know PRS made basses, but I ended up getting one of those because I had a PRS guitar. So I started looking online at Instagram at all of these accounts, and there is a whole community out there of people who are so enthusiastic about the instrument and about the technology and making advances in the construction of the guitars that looks a lot like the steel string electric guitar community and the drum community. They really come together around this instrument, and it's a new world for me. So it's a lot of fun to learn. I don't know how to play bass yet still, but I find myself doing what guitar players do, playing lead. I'm kind of...
Well, the thing with bass is, as we have this saying in Estonia that you give your finger, but the devil takes your whole hand.
Yeah.
Is there something like that in English?
I don't think I've heard that phrase before in English.
Yeah. So it basically means that you're just like, oh, I'll just try out this bass a little bit, and eventually it's like it's gonna be your main instrument.
So, tell us how you found the bass guitar as your instrument.
To me, it was really an accident. Actually, like to many other bass players that have found bass guitar through the hand of destiny or whatever. But I was 16 years old. I had played violin before that for like 8 years. And I did a bit of singing. And I played in a band in Estonia called 2 + 2 = 5. It was just like 2 boys, 2 girls, and our teacher. And the bass player left the band to continue his studies outside his hometown. And then I was like, oh yeah, I'll just start playing the bass, how hard can it be, right? And like I said, I gave my finger, but the devil took my whole hand. And, as soon as I touched the bass, it was like love from first touch. I fell in love with the instrument and just knew that from now on, our journeys will go together. And then I had to buy my first bass. And I didn't know anything about bass guitars. So I went to the store and I saw this beautiful red, kind of pearly, 5-string fretless. Beautiful, beautiful bass. By Court
That is
Turbo.
a heck of a purchase for your first bass, 5 strings and fretless.
But the thing is, so I buy this bass, not knowing anything about basses, and I'm just like playing it for a couple of months and all that. And all of a sudden, one friend asks, or just like tells me like, wow, this is so cool that you're playing fretless. And I'm like, what's that?
You didn't even know how advanced you were.
So the thing is, like, just because I had played violin for 8 years, I didn't,
Oh, that makes total sense. Yeah, because
so
you started at violin, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And then like, it was a bass. So eventually I did get myself a fretted bass as well. But I started off 5-string fretless. It was kind of funny.
So what do you find to be the advantages of a fretless bass?
I think the sound inspires me to play differently than I play with a fretted bass, mostly because the sound has kind of like it can make sad songs even sadder, just because the tone is kind of like crying, Yeah. It has this like little melancholic vibe to it. And also, I'm more careful when I play it because I have to think about intonation and like really find my way on the fingerboard. That means that I can't just shred or just like, noodle around, but I actually play melodies. So the sound inspires me to play more melodically, and I love that. So I think fretless bass is going to play a very important role through my whole life.
Yeah, I've noticed that about listening to your music, and I'm not sure when I'm listening exactly if I'm hearing fretless or not on the albums I've been listening to, but I do notice with the fretless, it seems like you can have more expression in the tones, and sometimes it almost sounds like a trombone, that, because you can just do that smooth transition between notes like that. But it does also seem extremely challenging. I've never played a fretless, but I would imagine it would be challenging.
Yeah, it is. Well, luckily the violin studies, they really train my ear well, so I can hear, when I'm off pitch, so I can fix my intonation. But I mean, nobody's perfect.
So you started off playing music at what age?
I think I got my first like singing lessons when I was 3, and I took the music school tests when I was 5 or 6 or something like that. And I was actually too young to be admitted officially, but they didn't want to let me go, so they actually took me like 1 year ahead of time and just like gave me like an extra year.
So were your parents musicians? Is that why they were kind of guiding you in that direction?
No, nobody in my family has ever been or is a musician besides me. But even though everybody loves music and, music has been important in their life. But my mom, when she was expecting me, she put like headphones over her belly and played me Vivaldi.
Oh, nice.
So I like to say that I became interested in music in the phase of embryogenesis.
Okay.
When my ears were evolved.
That makes a lot of sense, actually.
But I don't know. I come from Estonia, and Estonia has a very strong cultural life, music. Basically we sang ourselves into freedom from the Soviet occupation. And maybe that's why, like, my parents always found comfort in music, Maybe that's why, I don't know, they saw some talent in me. Maybe I was singing all the time or something like that, and they just decided to put me to music school.
Oh.
And, violin never felt right, but I'm glad that they didn't let me quit, because that led me to where I am now.
Well, it sounds like a good foundation. And I think I read online that you also played piano.
Yeah.
At some point. And I that's how I started in music, is basically being forced to take piano lessons. Mm-hmm. And I was always grateful afterwards, even though I hated it at the time.
Exactly.
But I was grateful for that foundation, because you can do anything once you understand music theory. And
yeah. And education is a thing that you never, it's never bad for you, you know.
Well, you must have had something special at the age of 3 for your parents to see that you had something that needed to be cultivated and nurtured musically. I mean, 3 years old, putting you in voice lessons, and then that transitions and evolves into violin and piano, and then finally you find the bass. So tell us about Estonia and your transition over to Sweden.
Well, I grew up on an island, a very small village. So nobody else was playing music there, really, and I was kind of the unpopular kid, because everybody else played football, and I did have some bullies there. But, that made me stronger, and I don't know, maybe I was a weird kid, but I just always just followed my heart and my bliss. And so eventually, when I graduated high school on my island, where I come from, I actually stepped into a music school already on bass. And after I graduated that music school in Tallinn, I felt like I need a bigger challenge, even though Estonian music scene is very, very colorful and rich. Yeah, I just felt like there's something bigger out there for me. I can't really explain it, but there's like some sort of call inside you that it's going to be hard, but you have to do this, You have to break through this. And so I decided to apply to this jazz school in Sweden. It's very easy in Estonia to become comfortable, because you have so many gigs and at weddings and clubs and caterings and stuff like that, and start earning money. And then once you're used to having money, you don't want to go to a place where you don't have money, or where you can't, where you don't know if you're going to have breakfast the next morning.
You're not going to take any chances or risks.
Yeah, but since I never had money anyway, I was like, I don't care where I am without money. So I decided to go to Sweden and just practice, like crazy. And I was actually, I think, the first electric bass player who ever got admitted to that school.
To the jazz school in Sweden?
Yeah.
So you went to music school in Estonia, in Tallinn, you said? Mm-hmm. And then was that kind of so that was after high school?
Yeah.
So that was kind of a college program?
It wasn't even like college. It was like just like a higher education than high school, but like just like a higher paper of music, but not really a college. And that was the same school that I applied in Sweden. That wasn't like a college, but like a really heavy music school,
Yeah.
to prepare you for college.
Okay.
So I got admitted there, and that I think that was the year that I did the the very foundational work, just practicing like crazy, being away from my family and friends for the first time and crying my eyes out until I was like, okay, am I going to keep crying or am I going to do something about it? And then I put together my band, MaiGroup.
MAI group.
Exactly, MaiGroup. And that changed my life. All of a sudden everything seemed much easier because I could play music and really put all my joys and sorrow into music and play with like-minded people. And it was kind of a very, very a big milestone in my life. And then after that, I applied to the Royal College of Music in Stockholm. I got admitted and I did both my bachelor and my master's degree there. In fact, master's degree I already graduated in a tour bus, David Crosby's tour bus.
Oh, wow.
On Skype in the middle of the night over the Atlantic Ocean between Texas and Tennessee. So by the time we reached Memphis at 8 o'clock in the morning, I had my master's degree.
Oh, fantastic. So before we get into David Crosby and touring with him and playing with him, I want to go back to get a sense of the place where you grew up. So you grew up on an island in Estonia. And the research that I've done on that country, I've never been there, but I think I read that there were 2,200 islands.
Yeah, lots of islands.
And so you're on one of these islands. How many people are on this island?
I'm from the biggest island called Saaremaa. Translated into English, it's island land. It's the biggest island. I think, my hometown has maybe 13,000 people. Okay. I don't know, maybe 40,000 people.
Yeah, pretty small town.
Yeah.
Yeah, a small area.
But it was beautiful. I grew up in this farm, learned how to work hard for my dreams, for something that I want. I learned to love unconditionally since we had so many animals around, and learned to love nature and appreciate what I have.
Yeah.
So it was beautiful, and we were very, very loved by our grandparents, and we were many cousins, and it was a beautiful, beautiful time.
And then you moved to Tallinn. Did your family go with you?
No, they stayed at the island.
So Tallinn, and the research that I've done on that city, very metropolitan, large. I think it's the largest city in Estonia, isn't it?
Yeah, but it still has 500,000 people. LA is, yikes, 18 million?
So Tallinn's like the LA of Estonia, but not quite
exactly.
as metropolitan. And then you make your way to Sweden and you graduate with your master's. So how did you go from having MaiGroup in Sweden to touring with David Crosby?
Well, I believe that kind of the key to success, whatever success is for you, that's a different story. But in my case is a combination of luck, hard work, and talent. So basically, I have always been a real hard worker. And as a woman, especially, because very often men are like, oh, you're just getting your gigs because you're a girl, stuff like that.
You hear that?
Yeah, I do.
Oh.
It's horrible.
That is horrible.
And shame on those people that do say something like that. But may that be on their conscience.
Yeah, well, show them your master's degree.
But so that was 2015, and I had kind of made my way up in Sweden and played with a lot of artists and toured a lot and recorded. And in June 2015, I was busking on the streets of Stockholm with Doug Seegers, who's actually from Nashville, kind of like a country singer-songwriter, just for fun. And everything went wrong on that day, everything. The police kicked us out from the subway station because you can't play there. And well, then I was like, let's go to, Old Town Stockholm, let's play there, because Doug had never been there. But I know Stockholm like the back of my hand, but on that day I took the wrong subway, took the wrong exit, took the wrong turns on the streets. Everything went wrong. And by the time that we got to Old Town and sat down to play, it started raining in 10 minutes. But during those 10 minutes, Lease walked by, who was in Stockholm touring with Jackson Browne. So this super long story short, the next day I went on stage with Jackson and his band. And that kind of started the whole crazy whirlwind adventure.
Incredible. And that's where you talk about luck.
Exactly. Those 10 minutes when everything went wrong. But now I look back and I'm like, wow, actually everything went right. Everything was almost like guided by the hand of destiny, that I would be there at that moment, But anyway, then I asked Lease to play on my next record, and he gave that record to David Crosby. And basically, like a couple of weeks after that, I got a letter from Crosby's producers that they wanted me to play on Crosby's next record. And then I already went to LA in 2016. Crosby and I, we wrote together the song Here It's Almost Sunset. And yeah, and then I started touring with him. So it was all very natural in many ways, but it wouldn't have happened without that 10 minutes on the streets of Stockholm. Or maybe it would have, but in some other way, because I believe that, life brings us the people that you're meant to meet.
As you may have noticed, there are great resources and advice mentioned in all our episodes. And for many of them, we actually collect all of these resources for you in one easy place, our newsletter. You can go to dreampathpod.com/newsletter to join. It's not fancy, just an email about each week's episode, featured artists, and resources to help you on your journey. Thanks. And now back to the interview.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by those. I mean, that's kind of the whole idea of the podcast, which is Dream Path and following your dreams.
Yeah.
But that's kind of a cliche, to follow your dreams. How do you do that? What's the practical application of that? And it sounds like for you have your ear to the ground because you're open to these opportunities that are coming your way.
Right.
And you're going with it, going with the flow. And you meet this musician, Greg Lease, and you're open to playing with him. That must have been terrifying to get up on stage with Jackson Browne.
Yes. Yes.
But you did it. And look where you're at now.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? I mean, I still can't believe it sometimes. And like I said, even though I've worked all my life towards making my dreams come true and eventually playing with my dream musicians and proving all the odds wrong, that I don't have any money or a place to live, or that I'm from tiny Estonia and how am I going to get to US or wherever, But like someone said, head in the clouds and feet on the ground, that dream big, take little steps. And my little steps have been just like working hard on my skills, honing my craft, staying true to myself, proving the others wrong that actually I can play.
Not only can you play, but you can lead a band with your melodic approach to bass playing. And that's something that I'm still learning about, because my understanding of bass has always been it's a background instrument. There are a few exceptions to that, like Les Claypool from Primus, and some of the funk bands from the 70s and 80s. You had a lot of bass that was kind of out there in the front, but most of the time it's a background instrument. And and I've heard David Crosby on YouTube talking about this, how your melodic playing is so unique that when you listen to your albums, you hear the bass as the driving force of the music. But you're not selfish about it. I mean, you share with the saxophone player and the keyboards and the guitar and everybody else. It's a very organic, you get a sense that there's a family playing this music. But at the same time, that the bass player, is driving the narrative. That's my impression anyway.
Well, I'm really glad you're saying that, because, I've always wanted to be the kind of band leader who's not making it all about me, and look at me and my playing and let me slap and tap and give you fireworks. But not that there's anything wrong with that, but I want to be like Steve Gadd, that he's so, he's a band leader. It's his songs.
Tell us more about Steve Gadd.
He's not all about, like, every song doesn't have a drum solo. You know what I mean?
Okay.
He actually is just like there to support and bring out the best in his co-musicians, And it's a beautiful thing, not being selfish in music. So I'm really glad you were saying that. Thank you.
Yeah.
But Steve Gadd, I mean, he's one of the biggest, most influential drummers of our time.
Uh-huh.
And what I love about him is exactly the modesty that he brings in his music, because we all know what he can do on his drums, but he feels like he doesn't need to show it all the time, But like, he really serves the music, he really serves the song, and it's a beautiful thing.
So do you think that your jazz education has prepared you to do the wide variety of music that you do better than other forms of music. So, for instance, if you had gone to music school and focused on rock or classical, do you think that that would have hampered you or hindered you in any way from being as flexible as you are today?
I think jazz is definitely is going the deepest, and that's why I went for it. I mean, because I do have like a foundation of classical music because of my violin studies, and I love the foundation that I got, like good sight reading abilities and all that, air training. But I chose jazz because it really goes deep in there, in terms of harmonic structures and scales and all that stuff, For me, it was like, maybe some people need to do ecstasy, to hear things that they haven't heard before. But, you can get the same effect with education. You learn new stuff, and all of a sudden you start hearing them, things that you didn't hear before because you didn't know they exist.
You're making connections and neural synapses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That all of a sudden you start, like when you write music, you start, I want to have this chord in there, which is like maybe some weird altered, or I don't know, +5 or -5 or whatever chord, things that you didn't know that existed before. And therefore you didn't hear them. Once you learned them, you hear them, you recognize them at places,
Yeah.
And it's such a beautiful thing, But really, I mean, jazz and classical music, they're so connected. If you listen to like Bach, like all his like sonatas and stuff, they're just like, I mean, how do you say, like tied together. There's so much jazz in the old classical music, It just was labeled differently, When it comes to rock music, I don't know if you can really learn rock music. How do you learn rock music?
I guess you learn 3 chords and
it seems kind of
start emulating others.
Yeah. So for me, jazz was the choice because, I mean, I've listened to a lot of like rock and pop music, but maybe that's what makes me special is that I kind of bring my jazz colors into rock and bring my rockier side into jazz.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Jazz to me, and I'm not a good musician, so I'm still learning the piano, and my piano teacher fired me when I was 12 years old. So
cute.
I didn't. I don't have the foundation that I would like to have. But when I'm studying piano and chords and chord structure, I'm finding, like you're saying, once you make those connections, like I just found out recently within the last couple of years what C7 is versus C or C9.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, okay, that's. And then you can do that with any chord. You can just add a 7th, add a 9th.
Right.
And to me, it's like, it feels like I'm learning a foreign language.
Yeah.
And it feels amazing once it's there.
Right.
You're like, okay, now I get it. And for me, jazz is like the most difficult foreign language to learn because it's just not as accessible as the 3-chord progression pop and rock that you hear. It's got nuance, complexity, emotion, yeah. But it's something I want to learn more about, especially after hearing your music.
Thank you. So what's your favorite chord?
I would say probably B minor. I go to B minor a lot. I like the minor chords.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Minor 9.
Oh yeah. I wish I could rattle off chords as well as you. But yeah, for me, the minor chords really hit me.
Yeah.
But I'm into blues too, so I like the major pentatonic, but I usually go to the minor pentatonic is what I kind of gravitate towards. Yeah. So do you play blues at all?
Yeah, that's like one of the very, basic things that you have to practice in your jazz education, just like simple blues, and eventually go to kind of the jazz blues with all the turnarounds and 2-5-1s. So I love a good blues. Yeah, I don't know why my music isn't like pulled towards that so much, but I love a good blues.
Yeah. So what do you find to be the most helpful or illuminating in terms of working with people who have been around for decades, like David Crosby, Jackson Browne, and Greg?
That they're human beings just like I am, with all their strengths and weaknesses and fears and all that. And it's very inspiring to see, you know, that it's okay for me to make a mistake if they are making a mistake, you know, and they're like idolized for decades.
Yeah.
Or to hear anybody, Chaco or Miles Davis or Coltrane or whoever, you know, and it's just like what you make of it and how you pull yourself through that stuff, you know. Do you beat yourself up for it, or do you just laugh about it and just like, oh, you know, whatever.
Yeah, it seems like we mythologize musicians like that, rock stars.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that it really serves us to do that.
No.
I mean, they are icons. They're complete cultural icons, and they're called rock stars for a reason. But at the same time, if we mythologize them and we as musicians, they are other than us. It's not attainable because they're so far out there. But if they're one of us, it seems like that's a healthier, more functional way of approaching music.
Yeah, because the thing what people do is they start comparing, especially musicians, they start comparing their story to someone else's story. And like I said, success is a different thing to different people. You know, is it money? Is it love? Is it millions of gigs? Is it attention? What is it? What is success for you, you know? But to be honest, you can be a rock star, but you can also be a really nice person. And that's like what Jackson Browne is, for example. He's so selfless, everything that he does for the environment. You know, it's a beautiful thing. And we've all met like those rock stars that are probably spoiled, you know, that are just horrible people. And that's sad. Why are you treating other people horribly? You're just like, I mean, I would say a really colorful Estonian expression, but I know there's a different version in English that you pull out your pants one leg at a time, just like I do, you know? So be nice. And my grandma said, you know, it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. And that's something I carry with me all my life. I always will, you know.
Great lesson.
Yeah. So I don't see any reason why some big stars should become assholes. It's just not cool. And it's way more inspiring when you're like someone that everybody is admiring, and yet you remain that kid you once was who was madly in love with music and did that for fun and for joy. And, you know, like Paul McCartney, I was trembling so much when I met him in my first rehearsal with David Crosby, and he came into the room and he was like patting my back. I was like, oh, don't worry, we're both bass players, you know. And he was so cool. He made me feel just like equal to him. Yeah. And that's a quality that I admire in people, when you don't put others down in order to shine bigger yourself, but, you know, when people rise by lifting others. That's beautiful. Don't be an asshole.
Okay, good quote.
Period.
I'll put it in the show notes. So how did that session come together with David Crosby and Paul McCartney?
Well, it was the first rehearsal for Crosby's first tour for me. And we were rehearsing somewhere in LA, and all of a sudden I hear, you know, that Jennifer Lopez is on one studio on the other side, and Paul McCartney was on the other side. And then Paul's band just came to see our rehearsal.
Incredible.
And then the next day we were invited to see their rehearsal, which was absolutely incredible. I got to see, you know, Paul just as far as you are from me right now, nailing his pace. He's incredible, you know.
Yeah.
But he was also a really sweet person. I will never, ever forget that, and inspiring me to not become an asshole.
Yeah, talk about iconic and mythological. He's right up there with some of the most mythologized musicians in the world.
Yeah.
Paul McCartney. And for good reason. But it's good to hear that he's a nice guy.
Really nice.
Yeah. So what is jazz fusion? I've been trying to figure that out. I looked at the categories of music that you play, and you know, it's jazz fusion, rock, country. What is jazz fusion?
I think jazz fusion is considered like a mixture of different types of music, different genres. So it's like fusion, you know, fusion food, fusion music.
Yeah.
So fusion itself can be like really harsh, kind of like very complicated, million time signature changes, very, very complicated. Jazz fusion is probably a little softer. You know, they consider Weather Report jazz fusion, right?
Yeah.
It's not on the same par with maybe, or like the same style than X Planet, you know, which is considered fusion. So it's jazz, but it has like influences from rock, pop, Latin.
I noticed last night, I thought that you were playing on a different time signature as the drummer for a while.
Yeah.
And then it finally came together. And I was like, oh, that's brilliant. I was with somebody. I was telling them, you see that? You hear that? I think that's 2 different time signatures. And that's what's so cool about learning about jazz. Is if you know a little bit about music and time signatures, you can pick up on that. You're like, oh, okay, now I'm starting to understand the language a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah. But
wow, cool.
But it seems like the process of learning how to do that would be like, rubbing your belly while patting your head at the same time. It's just, you have to train your brain to feel that.
It is, yeah.
What are some of the struggles that you have and that you see other musicians having in terms of just the business of music, being able to pay the bills, put food on the table?
That for sure, yeah. Because you basically, if you're a freelancer, you never know, right? You just have to keep working and practicing and keeping your technical skills up, and basically also have like a social life, because you tend to play with the people you hang out with. And that might be hard for some musicians, like for me. I'm a total loner. Then the other thing that's hard is, in the world that we live today, is the paradox of wanting to play music, only focus on music. Most musicians do not want to make like the self-marketing and self-promoting, which we are kind of forced to do now in the world of social media. The constant, paradox of just wanting to play music and play what's in your heart, but instead of that you have to spend so much time on like social media and kind of fighting through that news feed. Back in the days they didn't have Instagram or Facebook. The news of a great player spread from mouth to mouth. It was like, oh, this guy is great, you have to go see him. Or the only way to reach a person was to call on the home phone. Now most of your audience is sitting in their phones, and if you're not on social media, it's like you almost don't exist, And it's a horrible thing, because like to me it's a struggle, and it's even kind of ridiculous that when you like counting likes, and when you upload a photo of a nice sunset, you get like 100 likes, and then you put like a nice selfie with a bass guitar, you get like 3,000 likes, So it's like I feel so cheap when I'm doing that. It's horrible.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of noise out there and so much content that you're trying to break through, and we all are driven by the likes and trying to be seen and have our work appreciated and paid attention to, and it seems like that would be exhausting.
It is very exhausting. It's so draining emotionally. So imagine all the mental problems that arise for people that are like dealing with self-doubts and like self-esteem and all that, and then they see that, oh, someone else is doing much better on Instagram, not thinking that, well, that's not real life. Everybody's just putting out their best side, but everybody has their struggles. But I have a feeling that very many musicians are struggling with trying to be seen, trying to be heard under all this noise that is the constant interaction on social media.
Now, do you find that streaming is becoming a reasonable source of income, or that performing is really where most of how you pay your bills, basically?
Well, I definitely pay my bills by playing live. Streaming, it brings out a little bit money, but of course not as much as like selling records. And I do sell most of my records while I'm playing live.
Oh, yeah. And merchandise like shirts and things like that.
I haven't done that yet, even though I think I will probably soon.
Yeah.
But, but like streaming has its good sides as well, which is you don't produce plastic, you don't produce like CDs or, the covers or whatever. So you're kind of helping the environment with it.
Yeah. You're also helping Spotify and Apple.
Exactly. But I wish just musicians would earn more with it, because this like balance is very unfair.
Yeah, that seems to be the consensus of the people I've talked to, is that there's a power differential right now, and it's been this way for forever, I think. But the corporations that control what gets seen and heard, take most of the money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the sad part.
So where do you see yourself in the next 5 years?
I'm in the same place as I was back in the days when I felt that there are big things ahead. I just don't know what they are or how I'm going to get there. I just have to stay on this course and trust my journey and trust myself. I don't know where I'm going to be, but I do know that I'm going to be in the right place. You
Nice.
know, it's like I believe that life will guide the right people and lessons and right things to me. I will be given opportunities. I just have to be wise enough to probably say no to some and say yes to others. Just recognize what speaks to my soul. But I would very much like to be on the same course with this peace in my heart that I have found and just follow my bliss.
Nice. Now that you have bared your soul about the pain of the social media feed, where can we find you on social media?
Yeah, you can like, comment, and leave messages. Encouraging messages. Thank you very much. At Mai Leisz, yeah. On Instagram and Facebook. On Spotify, I have 3 albums out with MaiGroup. MaiGroup, one word. iTunes as well. But yeah, I mostly work on Instagram. That's kind of the most painless place for me.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll put all of this in the show notes, but for those listening, it's MaiLeisz.
That's right.
Okay. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
Hey, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Dream Path Podcast. If so, I have a favor to ask. Can you go to your favorite podcast service and give me a rating and review? Your feedback is what keeps this podcast going. I appreciate your time, and as always, go find your dream path.